Hey, Clayton. Deuteronomy 21 says that if Israel goes to war, they can take a captive woman, bring her home, and marry her after a month. How is that not exploiting someone who's just lost everything? How is that not treating a woman like property? This is a question that was addressed in an earlier interview. We did an interview with Dr. Carmen Imes about women in the Pentateuch, and we specifically talked about a lot of the laws and things that happen in the Pentateuch that seem really unfair to women, and she addressed this one in particular. She does a great job. You might want to go check that out. But in case you haven't seen that, I'm going to try and answer it here. Let me read to you the passage. Deuteronomy 21 says this: "When you go to war against your enemies, and the Lord your God delivers them into your hands, and you take captives, if you notice among the captives a beautiful woman and are attracted to her, you may take her as your wife. Bring her into your home and have her shave her head, trim her nails, and put aside the clothes she was wearing when captured. After she has lived in your house and mourned her father and mother for a full month, then you may go to her and be her husband, and she shall be your wife. If you are not pleased with her, let her go wherever she wishes. You must not sell her or treat her as a slave, since you have dishonored her." Let me start by saying this. The Bible deals with the world as it is, not as it should be. This is not how it should be. There should be no war. There should be no war brides. There should be no one who is taken captive in any way. This is not how it's supposed to be. So this law is not the Bible saying you should go out and do this. Go and make war and take women to be your wives. It is addressing the reality that sometimes there are battles. And what happens in a battle? Men die, and it leaves behind women. This is just the reality of the battle. Orphans and widows are created when there is war, and there is no avoiding that. So the question is, in this time and place, what would happen to them after those battles? In other ancient cultures outside of Israel, women would be sexually assaulted, often immediately right there as part of the pillaging of the town, and they would be taken and enslaved. That doesn't seem like a good outcome. But if that doesn't happen, if there's an alternative to that, what would it look like? What would it look like for a woman who has just lost everything to be cared for and provided for in an ancient society? The thing you've got to remember is that in that ancient society, everybody had to be a part of a household to be provided for. That's just the way the society was structured. There were no employers for a woman who has been widowed to go out and get a job and to provide for herself independently. She has to be part of a family. And if her family has just been destroyed through a battle, there's no families around to take care of her. Where's she going to go? If she doesn't find her way into a household, she doesn't have any resources. There's no welfare system for her to appeal to. There's no job to get. If you are not brought into a household and you are a free-floating woman, you will either be a beggar or become a prostitute. That's your options. So we got to imagine the situation where Israel is in a battle for whatever reason and Israel wins. And there is a woman among the survivors. How does she fit into Israelite society? Because they're the ones who can do something for her. Here's what God says really, really clearly. What cannot happen is you cannot take her, you cannot rape her, you cannot enslave her. The things that would have happened in other ancient cultures are not allowed here in Israel. That is not what's happening. So right off the bat, we are seeing something different from what would usually happen, and frankly still happens in some parts of the world today when people go to war. Here's what God says can happen. Marriage can happen. Marriage can happen. You can take this woman as your wife. Now, that means something more than being a slave. This is not someone being taken because you're going to treat her and exploit her. You're saying if you would like to marry her, that is on the table. Second thing it says is there's going to be no sexual contact immediately. You are not going to be able to just say, wow, she's good looking and I'm just going to do what I want because she's a captive. That's not how this works. There's no immediate sexual contact. Then she's going to be shorn of her beauty. She's going to have her nails trimmed and her hair shaved, and she is not going to be as physically attractive in that period. She's also going to get time to mourn for her family. She's going to be able to go through some form of grieving process. Now, we might look at that and say, well, it's more complex than that. It's longer than a month and so on. But there is at least an acknowledgement that the transition from a family who has just died into whatever comes next is going to require some level of grief and mourning, something that's culturally appropriate. And this is what would have been expected in that time and place. And then there is no option to cast this woman aside. She cannot be sold. She cannot be treated as a slave. If you are going to welcome her into your household, you cannot treat her as less than. This is not an ideal situation. Okay. No one is looking at this saying, wow, how great, how wonderful. It's going to go so smoothly. But here's what it does. It takes an individual who otherwise would have been denigrated in that society in so many different ways, and gives them dignity. They're part of a household and they are a wife. They are a true equal. Their material needs would be provided for. They're not out there begging. They're not out there selling themselves. They would actually be part of a family where they would be fed. It would also mean that they had entry into a new community. What are they going to do? Their community has been, devastated by this, and now there's these other people who have conquered them. What are they going to do? Well, if they have a way to enter into the community and become an equal, that's huge. It also restrained the sexual and violent impulses that happen in all sorts of war situations and says this is not going to be allowed in our society. Now, I'll just be honest, this whole situation doesn't sit easy with me. This verse still makes me uncomfortable, but I want you to consider the alternative. The alternative in the ancient world, if you were a woman whose people had just been defeated in war, would you rather be defeated by Israel, knowing they had this law, or some other nation, knowing what might happen to you? 100 times out of 100, you're going to pick Israel, because Israel's God restrained their impulses and pushed back on the dehumanizing aspects of war. And so if you're going to be defeated in battle, it ought to be by that sort of group of people. Remember, this is also not a prescription. This is damage control for life in a violent world. What God does in this law is meet people in the broken systems that shouldn't be the way they are. But he says, this is the reality of the world. So I'm going to come into it and I'm going to introduce new paths, new approaches that are going to restrain evil and move people towards dignity. It's actually an expression of his heart for the marginalized and the powerless to make sure that they are treated well, even when they have already suffered through tremendous, tremendous loss. Thanks for listening. If you've got your own questions, email questions@BibleSavvy.com. Like and subscribe to catch our regular episodes every Monday on the Bible Savvy Podcast.